Says it's going, it's about halfway done. Uh, it
I
looks
see it at the
like,
top of my screen, Glenn. It has the green saying custom live stream. So,
okay, so we are live.
yep.
Yay, good morning, everybody. Um, should I let the masses in?
Yes.
Could you check really quick to make sure that you can see the polls?
Let me see. I can still see the polls. Yep.
Fantastic. Then I think we are good to go.
Okay, I will now let in the swarming masses. Three, two, one, here they come.
Hi, everyone. We're going to wait just a couple minutes, let people filter in, and then we'll get started very soon here.
Hi, everyone. We're just going to wait 2 more minutes to get started as more people trickle in. Okay, it is 4:04, so I think we're just going to get started. Thanks everyone for joining us today, and we're just going to get right into it. Both of us, we want to introduce ourselves to all of you because we've not put on a webinar yet. My name is Grace Sanford. I am a current Massachusetts Peace Action intern. I'm also a student at Northeastern University studying political science, and I'll let my co-moderator Rowan introduce themselves.
Hi, like Grace said, my name is Rowan. I am also a student at Northeastern University, and I study international affairs and cultural anthropology with a Spanish minor, and also a minor in women and gender studies. We are very, very excited to be putting this on for you today. This is our first time doing something big like this. So I'm going to hand it back over to Grace to take it away.
So I first want to introduce our campaign to you all and really what we're about. So this is being put on by the Can Do campaign, which is the Climate and Nuclear Disarmament United, otherwise known as Can Do campaign, which is one out of the 4 primary campaigns that Massachusetts Peace Action has. And our campaign really seeks to connect the 2 most dangerous threats that threaten humanity and our Earth: nuclear weapons and climate change. And we call these the twin existential threats, not only because they are both competing for the extinction of humankind, but because one feeds off of the other. For example, the construction and testing of nuclear weapons and the militarism that follows creates greenhouse gases, contributes to deforestation, and allows for other activities that severely harm the environment. And these issues are so grand and overwhelming to so many of us that we become numb to these ideas of nuclear winter and human extinction. How do we wrap our mind around these? And we don't know how to approach combating them. So hopefully this webinar aims to continue linking both climate change and nuclear war together, but will also act as a resource to all of you on how to deal with these issues.
Thank you very much, Grace. So before we get started, I want to let you all know a quick summary of what the webinar today is going to look like. We have 3 wonderful speakers with us today, and then after we give our speakers our speakers some time to talk. We will then have a Q&A portion as well as a little bit of a trivia game. So jumping right in, our first speaker today is Dr. Becky Alexis Martin. She is a pacifist academic at the University of Bradford. Her work explores nuclear warfare, social justice, humanitarianism, and environmental issues in human rights. Her expertise is focused on nuclear geographies and decolonizing disarmament policy in the Pacific. She has authored over 65 news articles, book chapters, and peer-reviewed articles. Her first book, Disarming Doomsday: The Human Impact of Nuclear Weapons Since Hiroshima, critically considers the social, cultural, and spatial harms perpetualized by nuclear warfare, and was the recipient of the 2020 LHM Living Outstanding First Book Prize. So take it away, Becky.
Thank you so much for your generous introduction, Rowan. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be here, to be able to tell you a little bit about my work and my perspectives on your brilliant project, and to also talk a bit more about other really exciting projects and research that's happening now. I think it's really important that we kind of think about these that we think about these things. So it's a real honour to be able to have these conversations with you. So I'm going to share my screen firstly, and then hopefully, if we go to the beginning of my talk, you can all see something that says Nuclear Climate Nexus, let's act now. Can we all see this? Someone say yes.
Yes, we can, Becky.
Fantastic, amazing. Yeah, so as Rowan and Grace very aptly said, nuclear warfare and climate crisis are both these kind of twin existential threats. And as an environmental, natural, and social scientist, I'm quite invested in thinking about what we can do to support these places that have been historically affected by nuclear weapons testing and may face future threats from climate change. So that's where I kind of bring the nexus together. I look at how past and present come together. And I think it's quite apt that we begin with this when we think about this notion of psychic numbing. So for those of you who haven't come across the idea before, it's this idea that individuals and societies pull away from past experiences that were traumatic. They might withdraw attention from them. They might try and forget about them. This past is in the past notion. Or that they might draw away from future threats that are perceived to have massive consequences but low probability, for example. And a lot of this is around kind of the capacity of the human brain to deal with kind of major consequences. So we might think about, nuclear warfare, we might think about climate change, and the numbers that we are dealing with are so large that it is very difficult for us to kind of get our head around it. If we hear about somebody killed in a car accident, we can empathize, we can think, yes, this one person, suffered and lost their life. But the numbers we are thinking about in this context is multiple millions. So I think it's a really good place to kind of begin to kind of think about how we can move forward, is how we can go from psychic numbing to kind of feeling again, to engaging, to kind of channeling our empathy when we think about these big existential threats. I think with nuclear warfare in particular, this past it in the past attitude, which is very colonial, I should add, many of the places that are affected were in fact former colonies, has been really detrimental to moving forward and to doing things like getting reparations and support to communities. So I think it is really important that we do start to engage, and I'll talk a bit about how we can do that as my talk progresses. And I think with the climate crisis, we need to think forward. We need to start thinking beyond numbers, beyond models, and about human beings, saving the human, right? So that's one of the key things we'll be exploring. So one of the big challenges, of course, with the kind of cognitive dissonance that arises is that as victims increase, empathy decreases. And I wanted to share this kind of notion with an image that I took when I was in Christmas in the summer of 2023. So it was a return trip, and it kind of gives you an idea of how low-lying this lagoonal island is, this lagoonal atoll is. You can see there's literally seawater intruding across the land. Christmas is an interesting place. It is unique in that it's the largest coral atoll on the planet. However, it is not unique in being a very, very low-lying island. There are places like Tuvalu, like the Marshall Islands, French Polynesia as well, that are all, incredibly low-lying and are facing this future threat. But I think it's really important to think a little bit when we think about this psychic numbing. How do we care again, right? Before we start thinking about the issue, we need to start to learn how to care. We are bombarded with 24-hour news cycles, and we're overloaded with information. It is easy to kind of experience that psychic numbing, to feel afraid of the future perhaps, or to feel like you want to put past trauma behind you. But it is really important that we do find a way to begin to care again. And I personally think that these ideas of rehumanizing, of re-engaging with the human, with thinking about the individuals in a particular place, is really important. We need to get closer. We need to get talking and listening to the communities who are affected. And we need to communicate what we learn, and we need to support these communities to communicate themselves. We should be sharing stories. We should be sharing images. There's some amazing projects, I'll tell you a little bit about them later, that are already doing this, already give you space to connect with affected communities. You should have space to share as well. We need to recognise our own privilege, and when there's the opportunity to share space, to make sure that it is shared with those whose voices matter more, and who have voices from these places that are affected. And we need to get creative as well. A lot of the time when I think about the climate crisis, when I think about the consequences of nuclear warfare, as an academic, as somebody who's involved in policy, but also somebody who has a great passion for the arts, I think it is these kind of arts events sometimes that have the biggest impact. Like just thinking about, for example, Ellen Slavick's monstrous cartographies, her amazing artwork, and thinking about Kathleen Sullivan's New Manhattan Project, this incredible show that she put on at the theatre during, in New York during the UN Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons meeting, during the last meeting that was just packed out. Thinking about these kind of shows. I'm thinking about Chris Thorpe's A Family Business, that explores that link between kind of policy, academia, and the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons through kind of narrative theatre. It's smaller, but it's still really powerful. So there's all these kind of creative methods out there, that help you care, that help you engage. And I think it's really important because it's part of that process of rehumanizing, right? Of taking it beyond the newsreel and actually engaging, and thinking about the kind of history, the culture, and the lives of the communities and people who are affected. And so there's lots of places that are affected by nuclear warfare that are now affected by the climate crisis. So, for example, just one example here, but there are many. There's the Marshall Islands, and there's Enuitak Atoll, which has runic dome on it. So runic is this concrete dome that was built between 1977 to 1980, and it stores the radioactive waste from the US Pacific nuclear weapons tests. So these nuclear weapons tests were undertaken on the Marshall Islands. Some of them were undertaken in Christmas for Operation Dominic, and then the waste was just kind of dumped there, basically, on this low-lying island in a repository. So this is a good example of the nuclear climate nexus, because you've got these rising sea levels that mean that this nuclear waste is vulnerable to climate crisis. And the changing sea level and changing sea acidity due to climate change also impact the things like the speed of concrete degradation. And so you've got this issue arising. It is literally arising in the Pacific, and we don't know what will happen. But we need to be thinking about it, because we need to be thinking about how we can support communities and Marshallese people in the future, to ensure that there is not a nuclear accident, in a place that has already been extensively bombed, where America tested their largest nuclear weapons during tests like Castle Bravo. So there's this really important link, though, because a lot of these places where nuclear weapons are tested, as I said, are also the most climate vulnerable. So if we look around the world, from Kazakhstan to Lopnur, these kind of deserts, these islands, like French Polynesia, as I mentioned earlier, and Christmas, they're all vulnerable. And we know that weather-related events are estimated to displace about 143 million people by 2050. So this is just an extract from one of my BBC articles. You can go read it. It's got a horrible title, but it's quite useful. And so we know that this evidence of climate crisis is undeniable, and that it goes beyond the hockey stick curve. You can see these changes, and we're already getting narratives from communities who are affected, but I feel as though they're not being amplified loud enough. And I feel as though young people at the moment feel as though there's, what do they do? How do you take action? So we'll talk a bit about that later on. But I want to focus in on the Pacific first and think about these places where nuclear weapons were tested as well, because it's quite extensive. As you can see, I've got a map here by John Waddingham, that comes from the brilliant Nick McClelland's book, Grappling with the Bomb. I recommend everybody read it if you read something. But you can see there's been nuclear weapons tests across the region, and in Australia, Bikini Atoll, Johnston Atoll, Christmas Island, Christmas, and Mororua, as well. It's quite extensive, but you'll also notice that these places, the reason I wanted to show you a map is because they are these Pacific small island states, so they are the most vulnerable. And for a lot of the communities who live in these places, they've already been subject to forced migration. So the American tests relocated the Marshallese people across several islands, including one that wasn't suitable for them to live on. And there was within island forced migration for the British nuclear weapon tests as well. So I think it's interesting thinking forwards about how we deal with the psychic numbing from these tests with communities. So one of the things that I've done, this is a photo of a bunker on Christmas, is I've worked with local communities to help record their stories and learn their kind of lived experiences. And I've travelled round the island looking at the different sites and kind of mapping and thinking about, the history and the experience of place. I wanted to show you some of these pictures because many of you will have never seen Christmas. Many of you might not know what a kind of former militarized island looks like, you know. And so this is an old bunker. This bunker just sits there. You can see it's surrounded by tropical foliage. And this is the remains of the old church. This is where the army officers used to go, pray every Sunday. Afterwards, it was lived in by a family, and family members still live there to this day, not in the church, but in another part of the barracks nearby. So this is somewhere that was called home by thousands of soldiers and is still called home by thousands of people who live on the island, despite the fact that obviously the nuclear weapons tests have left a legacy of harm and there's a future threat of climate change. And so I think the narratives and the stories of the people, right, are kind of one of the key things really to thinking, how we can take away and get away from this psychic numbing. And I think there's many ways that the communities can express themselves. I was fortunate enough last summer to be working on a project to do with epistemic justice, so justice of knowledge and ensuring that the community at grassroots level have engagement and understanding of what's happening with the Treaty for a Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, such as access to the treaty in their own language and creative exercises. So I helped organise some creative art sessions, some painting sessions, as you can see. For this girl, she told me it was one of the first times she'd been able to paint because it's not on the curriculum, and her face was just full of joy, but she was painting hydrogen bomb tests, stories from her family that had been passed down, these oral histories. And I think that a picture can tell 1,000 words. It can really rehumanize. I feel just looking at her and remembering watching her paint. I'm sure you can all see, the kind of, you can imagine what her life must have been like, and you can imagine what it must be like for her to have this as part of her family history, right? The nuclear weapons tests. To the other side of the picture, there's a meeting with the local government that I worked with and helped organise to help provide training for the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And you've got one of the ambassadors calling in. And one of the things I think I'm proudest of that I worked on with the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation was organising for the women, some of the women of the island, to come over and come to New York to actually share their voices and share their testimonials. So here's 3 of them here representing Christmas, representing Kiribati, and ensuring that narratives are shared with those, within these spaces. But of course, these are very privileged spaces and not everybody gets to be in these spaces. Like, it's great that we're now able to facilitate and make sure that Charisma's voices are heard at the UN, where they need to be heard, particularly women's voices and younger people's voices, I think, because it's a slightly patriarchal society. But it's not always the case that kind of everybody else hears what happens behind the doors of the chamber, So the other thing that's really important, I think, is kind of making sure that the wider world kind of gets a glimpse of the hopeful things that are happening, of the amazing work that's happening with the Treaty for a Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. So one amazing project that I just think is absolutely brilliant. It's not my project. It's a project run by Dimity Hawkins, who's one of the former, I think, no, she's still one of the grand dams, I would say, of ICAN, so the International Campaign for the Abolition of Nuclear Weapons. So it's called the Nuclear Truth Project, and it's an international initiative that helps to connect Indigenous and First Nations people with experts, civil society organisations and governments working for nuclear abolition. So it's aimed at developing protocols for working with impacted people. So I use their protocols for my research. And it's an amazing space if you want to kind of get engaged and you want to see what's happening from the nuclear side of things. And the Nuclear Truth Project is a really good place to begin. And they're really accessible, really friendly, and have loads of resources to help you kind of rehumanize and get back, and feel empowered, because you can do something, right? And I think I really do believe anybody can. I say this as somebody who's cared passionately about existential threats since I was, very young, and obviously I'm privileged enough now to actually be speaking to you, to be writing about it, and to see action being undertaken. But we need a critical mass, I always think. I think we need as many of you as possible engaged and, there and trying to kind of create change and not letting yourself get numbed, defrost, get out there, make these changes. And there are so many resources, there's any academics in the field, you email us, we would love to hear from you and direct you in the right direction. There's communities, there's youth forums like Youth for the TPNW, Youth for the Treaty for Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. We're here for you. And there's no correct discipline. All knowledge is useful if it's factually correct. Study, learn, come along to talks, come along to courses, use your creativity to share what you're thinking. And don't feel pressured to be part of the social media hubbub as well. It can be exhausting. It's 24/7. So I think it's really important to give yourself a break and focus on those things that don't involve arguing with those who don't agree with you. It sounds terrible, but I don't think they matter. What matters is the science. What matters is the passion and care that you have. And what matters is the power that you have to actually make change. And you have more power than you realize. So thank you so much. I put a few bits and pieces of my work to have a little look at if you're interested. Other than that, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you, and I hope it's been interesting to learn a little bit about my work and some of the things I care about and how you can push back against this cognitive dissonance and psychic numbing that can arise. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Becky. I think any of us can take so much away from that presentation. Hopefully, maybe we can get a link to the presentation if people want to go back to it in the chat. But we are going to move. Thank you so much. We are going to move right along into our next speaker, Susan Lamont. And also, for everyone to keep in the back of their minds, we are going to have a 5-minute Q&A portion just to hopefully keep everything moving along, not too long. So if you have any questions, wait, if you can, think about it and put them in the chat when that section arises in the webinar. So again, our next speaker is going to be Susan Lamont. For the past 4 years, Susan Lamont has worked with Extinction Rebellion Boston as a climate activist. She is often a spokesperson for the group and collaborates with the media and messaging group. And Susan also participates in the chapter's Red Rebel Brigade, and she previously worked in cancer research as an information systems manager. Do we see Susan? I know she was here.
Yes, I'm here.
Fantastic. Take it away, Susan.
Thank you. Just getting the sharing screen thing going on. I'd like to thank everyone, especially everyone for coming, and especially our very competent host today. And it's been a pleasure working with them this week. I am from, as you heard, I am from Extinction Rebellion Boston, called XR Boston to our friends and people who know us well. And this is a climate activist group that started in London in 2018 in the fall and spread quickly worldwide. The Boston chapter was founded in 2019. And for the past 50 years, climate activists have been asking the government nicely to stop the climate crisis, to get off fossil fuels, to start looking towards renewable energy. And that hasn't really happened. So the Extinction Rebellion movement is about disruption and nonviolent direct action and civil disobedience. And so this is what we do. And let's see. So the intersection with the climate crisis and the nuclear weapons or deployment, the possibility of nuclear deployment is very gives one pause, but they're definitely related, as people have cited already here. And one thing I like to show, well, I don't like to show it, but one thing that's really pressuring this is world population. And this is the current world population. It's about 8.1 billion people. And this is over double than what it was 50 years ago. And this is putting a lot of pressure on resources. And if you start thinking about what climate crisis is doing here, it's, let's see, my clicking is not, all right. Let's see if we get here. Just having problems with my browser. Here we go. This, so if you think of terms in the climate crisis, which is rendering a lot of land as uninhabitable for as much as 1/3, 1 in every 3 people, that comes out to about 2.7 billion people. That's a very scary statistic. And I was, when I figured out this was going on today, that's pretty upsetting. And so that really leads to some, like, I just want to go run away and hide, some psychic numbing there. And so what do we do about that? Well, one thing I like to do, I like to work with Extinction Rebellion. And I'm going to see if I can, and we'll go right here. And so here's some of our members occupying the governor of Massachusetts office early last year, demanding an end of burning fossil fuels and basically specifically new fossil fuel infrastructure, because the state has allowed new power plants and new airports, which is a huge source of carbon emissions, and also permitting new gas pipelines out in Western Massachusetts. They're not really understanding that we're in a climate crisis and we're supposed to be stopping this behavior like immediately. So this is a good thing to get involved in, but I understand that many of you out there are thinking, oh, this sounds great, Susan, but I don't have any time or any resources and I can't really get involved. Well, we offer, even if you don't live in Boston, we offer a chance to get involved. And I will show you this. I have to do the all right. So we have a calendar which is filled with all sorts of interesting events. I'd like to point out, for those of you who are local, we have 2 big events. We have this Red Rebel Day of Action, which is a funeral for nature, and it's going on around the world, actually, but it's only Extinction Rebellion's had a hard time getting going again, is up to the 2020 levels because of the pandemic, especially in the United States. So worldwide at this point, maybe, there's maybe 10 Red Rebel brigades, and a lot of them are in England. And so, but it's still fun to participate. And so I hope you'll join us for that. There's going to be a funeral, a die-in where you pretend to be dead on the ground to symbolize what the climate crisis is doing to us. And on Earth Day, we're having a party for the planet. So I'll go back to some other events here. We have during the week, we have a daily standout at the Massachusetts State House, and we've done it for 202 days now. And all you have to do is sign up, and you can hold a banner or give out flyers and talk to people passing by. And it's a good way to meet other climate activists. Something for everyone worldwide is that you can join our climate grief circle. All you have to do is RSVP. And I find this very helpful. I've gone to a bunch of these, and it's a nice way of dealing with, just your sadness over what's happening to the earth. We have, as Dr. Alexis Martin noted, art is a good way of dealing with issues. And so we have art builds regularly. We have one in Boston. We have a very active group in Arlington, which is a suburb of Boston. And they are also having art builds. We have new member orientation. Again, this is open to everybody, an online meeting, and you can find out more about our movement. We do have people, as I mentioned before, who participate totally through Zoom. We had our head of media and messaging was located in Florida till just recently, and she moved here. And marshal training, that's for those 2 parades and processes. You help people cross the street. There's press releases, how to write a press release. We always need people in media and messaging, some neighborhood cleanup, flyers, and postering, which goes on chapter wide. And then again, the Red Rebel Day of Nature. And we have also, you can come out to Arlington again and and bring some of your stuff. I brought a great computer monitor that no longer worked with my computer. I brought it out there and was able to find it a nice new home instead of like, whatever they do when they say they're recycling it. And as my introduction mentioned, I am a member of the Red Rebel Brigade. I'll just show you a picture. I found this morning. And it's sort of a cross between a mime troop, and we're mourning for the death of life on Earth, and we're at both processions at the end of April. So make sure you come out and see us. I'm the first person sort of squinting away there. It's pretty silly. And I will leave you with just a quick video we took a couple of years ago when we visited the Cape. And this is sort of what we do. We won't be doing this exact thing at these parades, but it sort of gives you a feel for what we do. And so that's it. And I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to put some information on the chat if you want to get in touch. You can still be a Red Rebel for those coming events if you're interested, and you can and attend any of our events. If you have any questions, just email me or just go to xrboston.org and you'll get the picture. So thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Susan. I think that was fantastic. It's always great to learn ways that individuals can get more involved and really be a part of something to help make change. Our next speaker that I'm going to introduce is wonderful Yurlet Rakhmatullah, and he is a Kazakh emerging global security expert and peace and justice advocate. He is the co-founder of STEP Organization for Peace, which is the first Central Asian youth-led initiative for nuclear justice, representing the voices of his generation at UN high-level conferences and working groups. Yurlet has actively collaborated with prominent organizations such as the United Nations, UNESCO, CTBTO, Schmidt Futures and Rhodes Trust, and others on more than 30 national and global projects. Currently serving as the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Working Group author at EVN Basic, a global network of high-potential technical and policy experts, Yurlet's work focuses on advancing inclusive nuclear governance in the NPT agenda. Moreover, as a Hungarian scholar at Ludovica University of Public Service in Budapest, Hungary, Yurlet leads a research project centered on AI governance and safety. So I'm going to give it away to Yurlet.
Thank you so much, Rowan, for this kind invitation. And good morning, good day, and good evening, everyone connecting to us from around the world. I'm happy for the invitation to the Massachusetts Peace Action and providing this platform to speak about nuclear disarmament and climate change nexus with focus on youth action from youth perspective. And I'm proudly representing Kazakh youth today as one of the founding members of STEP Organization for Peace. So let's start. My presentation today outlines the following things. First, I would like to introduce more about my background, then I will focus on the linkage between nuclear disarmament and climate crisis. Then I would like to focus my speech on environmental and humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons and nuclear testings around the world. Then I will talk more about what young people can do to resolve these issues, and I will provide you some recommendations that I follow, and then I will conclude my presentation. So I started my journey not so long ago. I became interested in nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament back in 2021. I joined the youth wing of the organization, of the secretariat of this Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty Organization, and I was lucky to be to learn about citizen journalism from the Atomic Reporters team. Then, as an intern at Friedrich Ebert Foundation, which is German political foundation we organized the first summer school for young people in Astana, our capital city, where we engaged more than, I believe, 50 young people from different parts of Kazakhstan, and we taught them about the nuclear legacy of Kazakhstan, about different international treaties in this field. And I continued my journey in disarmament, mainly focusing on peace education. And last year, we were lucky to participate in the second meeting of state parties to the TPNW, Treaty on Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons in New York. And we organized the first Kazakh youth side event on the contemporary nuclear politics and our engagement in this field. Yeah, and as Rowan said, I'm also a founding member of STEP Organization for Peace. We are a baby organization we just established last October. But despite that, we already became finalists of the PACE Award competition by the Basel Peace Office. And I'm also engaged in a different kind of projects, but let me focus on our topic because I kind of talk a lot about myself, and I don't like that. So we have two main challenges as a humanity. On the one hand, is nuclear weapons and also climate crisis, and both of them are existential threats to humankind. And we should understand that the world is at the same time interconnected by these issues, but it's also fragmented by them. But what we should understand as young people is that we can't resolve them by focusing on each of them individually. So we should address them together. Because as already Susan mentioned, we already have 8.1 billion people in the world, and the consequences of this crisis will lead to devastating implications such as starvation, the competition for resources. So I believe our young part of the audience, like young people, more or less engaged in climate action, activism, and climate-related advocacy. But unfortunately, young people are not so well integrated in nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation issues. So I believe that after this presentation, you could know more about the intersection between these two issues and raise your voices on the national and international arenas. So today I just wanted to show you what kind of environmental impacts could like rapid direct nuclear attack lead to. So you can scan this QR code or go to the website called nuclearsecrecy.com/nukemap. It's like a generator of models. You can change the settings and see what nuclear attack by nuclear bombs or other kind of technologies could lead to. So I chose Boston as we are delivering this event to Massachusetts people. And if you know, in the beginning of this month, we commemorated the Remembrance Day of people suffered from nuclear testing in the Marshall Islands. So I decided to choose the atomic bomb that is nearly similar to the biggest nuclear test tested by the United States in the Marshall Islands. So which was around, I believe, 12,000 kilotons. No, I'm sorry. It was around 20 million tons. I might be mistaken, but we should understand that nuclear weapons evolved a lot since the 1960s, and now we have smaller nuclear weapons, but they are way more effective and they are way more accurate. So just imagine that one nuclear bomb of, let's say, 12.5 kilotons was directed to Boston, and it will lead to the following impacts, such as you can see the numbers on the screen, how many people will die from this kind of event and how many people will be affected by in the way of injuries. And also you can see what kind of other major environmental impacts we could see by the scale. On the right part of my slides, you can see the radius for the following things, such as firewall, radiation, and blast, moderate and light blast damages, as well as thermal radiation. So in this scenario, we will probably go to the nuclear winter with following radiation fallout. So yeah, this is really, really, let's say, depressing scene. But besides, let's say, potential nuclear attack, we can also know about the consequences, namely humanitarian impact of nuclear testing. Many states around the world actually experienced nuclear testing on their nations and communities, starting from Algeria and Australia, and to North Korea, Pakistan, and to Ukraine and Uzbekistan. And nearly all Central Asian states, like Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and also Kyrgyz Republic, but I forgot to mention it on the slides. I apologize for that. They also experienced the impact of nuclear testing on their population. So speaking specifically about the case of Kazakhstan, I would like to focus on the Semipalatinsk nuclear test site, which is located in the eastern Kazakhstan. You can see it on the map. It's close to south of Russia and east of People's Republic of China. For nearly 4 decades, the Soviet Union, Soviet government tested at least 56 nuclear bombs on that territory, which affected the local population, and it's still affecting the young generations and probably will last forever. So Kazakhstan closed the Semey polygon, Semey nuclear test site back in the 90s, in 1991, after the decades of civic activism led by local and other civil society members, survivors, and other members of nuclear affected communities. So currently, we're still facing the consequences, as I already said, of the nuclear tests on the territory of Kazakhstan, namely the public health care issues, mutations among young people, old people, and yeah. So by summarizing the linkage between nuclear weapons and climate change, I made this Venn diagram where you can see the points of connections, such as intergenerational harm or safety and security of nuclear installations, or threat to food supply. But I also differentiated the impacts of nuclear weapons and climate change respectively. You can see and read it on the slides. So let me focus a bit to the psychic numbing with focus on young people. Personally, I don't like the idea that young people should be at the forefront of activism, advocacy, and I don't know, like policy making when it comes to nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament, because we are only in our 20s and 30s and we're still discovering all these issues, and we shouldn't take the whole responsibility, and we should like put more or like remind responsibility to older generations who are in charge of these issues. If young people are at the forefront of this activism, then it's just a bad sign of lack of work back in the previous decades. So I don't want to blame like old generations or like our like mentors and teachers, but I would like to call for the intergenerational responsibility, and so for intergenerational solidarity. So how we can do that? You can do this following these recommendations, because I found out them during my like years of activism in this field. First and foremost, let's democratize the peace education and minimize the information asymmetry. Like when I started engaging in this field, I really didn't know where to start and what to do. But there is a lot of education initiatives that are free, and we should empower them because they make a really good work in the promotion of disarmament and non-proliferation, and also international security. You can start by watching and passing free online courses by UN Office for the Disarmament Affairs, the fact sheets, as well as consume peace education content on TikTok, Reels, and other kind of social media platforms. Another point that I would like to mention is putting disarmament in your agenda if it's connected to climate and environmental activism. Also, please put efforts in the coalition building, because intersectionality is a key in addressing these two major crises. Also, try not to stay in your own social bubble and engage more with people in other social bubbles, because they probably have different opinion towards nuclear disarmament and activism. And lastly, I would like to say that it's important to build relationships and friendships with people from nuclear affected communities, namely survivors in the third, second generation, and please support them in their starts. And thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Yola. That is fantastic. And I hope that everyone took so much away from it, because I know that I did. I love working with these people, and I love finding more ways to get involved. So I want to move on to our next portion of today's webinar. We're going to be doing a Q&A section. So those questions that have been brewing in all y'all's brain, I would love to hear them in the chat. And then my co-host Grace and I will pick a couple to ask our wonderful speakers. That way we can have to say. Get your questions. There was one question I would like to start with a little bit ago that is directed towards Becky, that was about the populations that are living in the affected area, and how dangerous is it to live in these areas that have been affected by radiation, by the nuclear radiation?
Excellent question. So I'm currently investigating this as an environmental scientist. So the first thing we need to bear in mind is that it is not just ionizing radiation that is the risk. So there's multiple pathways of exposure, and you can get different types of ionizing radiation. So you get gamma, which kind of goes straight for everything. It goes through concrete, but it's short distance. So gamma is not very pleasant, but you're unless you're kind of at the epicenter, you're probably okay. The things that are worrying, I would say, are what we call radionuclides, so particulates, alpha and beta particles, which are basically kind of little bits of residual radioactive material that can stay in sediment, they can go into water, they can go into groundwater and aquifers, and they can kind of stay in marine environments and bioaccumulate up. So you know how everybody's heard, for instance, about the methyl mercury issue in the Everglades affecting species like like the Floridian panther, or similar heavy metal bioaccumulation in the sea through tuna and shark, which is why it's not good to eat oily fish and big oily fish at the top of a trophic level too often. You get the same thing with plutonium, with americium, with curium. So these particulates can bioaccumulate up the trophic level, and also with kind of bottom feeders, detritus feeders. So we really need better studies to look, first of all, at ionizing radiation risk, whether it's gamma, beta, or alpha, because a lot of the sites have not been thoroughly examined. Most of the Pacific Islands, we don't really know what's in the saltbush, so to say, and monitoring has been spot sampling, it's been minimal, or it's been environmental observation, and a lot of remediation work has been undertaken by nation states, organizations that have been commissioned by the nation states who did the bombings. So it's not that we can't trust them, but it's that we don't know whether the work that was done then is up to today's environmental standards. I say this as somebody who is a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Public and Environmental Health. Now, the other big issue that we don't talk about is what I call paramagnetic materials. So I've written about this, and these are your polychlorinated biphenyls, your persistent organic pollutants, your stuff like DDT, your transition metals, your arsenic, your cadmium. They're carcinogenic, some of them. They're teratogenic. They cause birth defects as well. They stay in your bodies, and they are usually found in military sites, so former military sites, because it's not just radioactivity that you get from nuclear weapons testing. You get all sorts of other pollution. So a good example of this is over in Emu Field and Maralinga in the south of Australia, where the nuclear weapons were tested there, because you get all this kind of other, you get beryllium in particular, and beryllium causes berylliosis, which is this horrible, it's not a cancer, but it's a very nasty lung disease. It's a bit like silicosis or asbestitis, where your lungs kind of get choked up and kind of, collapse essentially. Due to the toxic contamination and the harm that it does, and beryllium itself is carcinogenic. So if the berylliosis doesn't get you, cancer does later. So there's all these different environmental contaminants that people are living with. I think it is no coincidence that in places like Semipalatinsk, Kazakhstan, and in Kirisomas, two examples off the top of my head, lifespans in the mid-60s, right, for both those areas, and cancer rates are higher, cancer incidence is higher than you would expect. Cardiovascular disease incidence is higher than you would expect, looking at the kind of medical records. Obviously, you cannot directly link it and say, and there's too many confounding factors. There's too many things that get in the way for us to be like, right, it's the environment. But it is very likely, I would say, that these different environmental issues are causing health effects. And it's not just ionizing radiation. So these places are often polluted. These places need further environmental monitoring and need further cleanup. One of the things that we're hoping with the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons is that it will kind of begin to facilitate some of that remediation work. We will see. Fingers crossed, touch wood. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Becky. I'm going to now give it over to Grace, who has our next question ready.
Yes, so we had another very good question that I think any of our three speakers could touch on. It reads, besides from getting more active and hearing the stories of affected people, how can we help people to stay empathetic when more people are involved in climate and nuclear disasters and crises? I'm sure go ahead, Susan.
As Dr. Alexis Martin said before, I think just being more, thinking locally. I know that our group is, thinks locally all the time, act global, think globally, act locally. I think to just see the people suffering around you is a really good way to stay empathetic. We had a group down in East Boston, and these folks are in the middle of the all the fuels for Logan. They're in the all the heating oil for Massachusetts, all the gasoline, all comes into this one place, and they're people living among these gas tanks, and they hear the jets from Logan, And and they wanted to put a substation in. It was like enough already with these people. They're just suffering there, so there's chances and opportunities to remain empathetic, I think.
Thanks, Susan. Becky or Yurdalette, would you like to touch on that question?
Yes. Could you repeat it again? Sorry. I just had a little moment of, I was so interested in the reply, in Susan's reply, that I kind of forgot what the question was. So again.
No worries. So it says, besides from getting more active and hearing the stories of affected people, how can we help others to stay more empathetic when people are involved in additional climate and nuclear disasters and crises?
By providing reminders of the humanity of the communities who are affected, by giving these communities space to actually speak, by ensuring that their voices are heard, by ensuring that their images are shared, and by ensuring that that we remember and respect that they're human. I think that's kind of key, really. But it's something that this is a problem. This is why the nuclear weapon tests were undertaken in places like the Pacific, in places like Novaya Zemlya, and in like New Mexico in the US, is because they were hidden, they were far away, they were out of sight, out of mind. So our job is to reveal, our job is to show, our job is to tell, and to do that in a way that is that is insightful and provides dignity and provides space for these communities to kind of further express and elaborate on their stories and what they want and what they need. I think the notion of epistemic justice is really important, this idea of justice of knowledge, particularly in the context of existential threats. I think communities need to have the opportunity to be more informed and to engage more with policy, and we need to obviously by seeing these communities supporting these actions, is important too. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Becky.
I just want
Go
to
ahead,
make
Yurdalette.
a small follow-up. Yeah, in general, I agree with colleagues Susan and Dr. Alexis Martin, and but from my personal perspective and background, I believe it's really hard to stay 24/7 empathetic towards survivors and peoples of nuclear affected communities. So please don't forget to prioritize your own mental health first, and then if you have capacity, stay in solidarity, and just as Becky said, give more space and platform to the survivors, to the people directly affected by nuclear testing and nuclear weapons. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. I think that's a really important point that you touch on, to be able to be present and give our full attention and passion and energy that we want to put into
because
these
it's
issues.
not a sprint, it's a marathon, because like it's something that will, I mean, this advocacy work is for life once you enter it. And so please try to stay there as long as you can and not exit it. But once you do that, we also respect that. So think in the long-term vision that you should work in the long term. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, guys. That was fantastic. We are going a little over time here. So, Paul, I see you have your hand raised. If you could please put your question in the chat, that'd be fantastic. And we can have them answer in there. We are now going to move on to a little fun portion that we have. We are going to do a trivia game. Woohoo! So let me share my screen. Wonderful. All right, wonderful. And my good friend Glenn here is going to be posting the questions in the polls. You guys will have about 30-ish seconds to answer. They're just, bubble questions really quick. But just want to do something a little fun. So for our first question, human carbon emissions have raised the global temperature by how many degrees Celsius?
Question answers are coming in hot. Let me know when I should close it.
I'm gonna have it go for just a couple more seconds. All right, let's close it. Let's see what our number one answer was. Our number one answer was actually the one correct, so most of you guys got it right. The answer is 1.1 degrees Celsius. So good job there. All right, our next question. How many nuclear warheads are in existence globally as of June 2023? And once again,
Questions
we'll
coming in
have
hot. Can we do a countdown to make it even more intense?
Oh, sure. I'd love to do a
Oh,
countdown. Let's
sweet.
do it.
Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Locking it down.
And once again, most people got it correct there. Good job. Globally, there are 12,520 nuclear warheads in existence as of June 2023, which is an inordinate amount. Any of these numbers, honestly, is an inordinate amount. But that is how many are globally. There are about 5,000 of those are US and about 5,000 are Russia. And that's just off the top of my head. I don't remember the exact statistics, but we can get those to you. So for question number 3, this one relates to what Becky was talking about. How many nuclear weapons were tested across the Pacific?
Get those fingers clicking. We got 19 seconds left. 10 seconds.
Glenn, I appreciate your enthusiasm.
The enthusiasm's coming in hot for peace. 3, 2, 1.
Good job. Good job. Got it a good amount once again. Got it correct there. The correct answer is 318. All righty. Now moving on to a climate question. What climate crisis? What are the? Oh, pardon me. What are climate crises impacts to coastal waters in the Pacific? And this one is a multiple choice. You can select multiple answers.
Getting fancy over here.
I know.
10 seconds. You better click. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Bam.
Good job, guys. All of those are actually correct. The sea level rising, ocean acidifying, water surface temperature increasing, and coral reef bleaching are all impacts to coastal waters in the Pacific because of the climate crisis. All right, question. Oh, we have 8 questions total, just so everyone's curious, in case anyone is curious. Question number 5. On average, between 1993 to 2019, Greenland has lost how many tons of ice per year due to global warming?
Poor Greenland.
Poor Greenland.
Five, 4, 3, 2, 1.
This one was actually once again one of a very high number, 279 billion tons. Very excessive, but
Only 3 people got that right.
only
Wow.
3 people got it right. Congratulations to the 3 people who got it. All right, chugging along here. Question number 6. Roughly how much of the world's electricity comes from renewable energy?
10 seconds. Three, two, one. Boom.
Correct answer was 30%, and about a third of you got that right, which is good. We're starting to make good headway, but definitely need to be doing a lot more in the way of renewable energy. All right, question number 7. In 2021, the mass weapons producer Raytheon received how much money from the US government to produce nuclear long-range standoff missiles?
Raytheon, what are you doing?
And for those of you who do not know, Raytheon is a major weapons producer of both its regular weaponry as well as nuclear weaponry here in Massachusetts.
Ray be harshing the vibes. 5, 4, 3. Why did I call Raytheon Ray? Okay, anyway, ending poll.
And in 2021, they received $2 billion to produce those weapons.
Ooh.
Unfortunate. Need to stop doing that. And final question of the day, what is / are the effects of nuclear weaponry on the climate?
I think people are getting this one pretty easily.
This one was a little bit in the bag.
It's in the bag. It's a softball. It's coming in hot though. It's just about everyone. Okay, we got one for deplete the ozone layer only. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Bam.
The correct answer was all of the above. So technically, the people who said deplete the ozone and reduce precipitation, you are not wrong. But it happens to be all of those things. Thank you so much, guys. And for just finishing off, we have some action items. So I'm going to hand it over to Grace.
Yes, so I will be very brief because we have gone over time, and I want to let all of you go by not going over too much time. So our action items, we always love to end our webinars with action items for things that you can do to, change our representatives' minds, especially regarding legislation that's in the Massachusetts State Legislature, and that's also in the US Congress. So the first action item is the Nuclear Commission Bill that's currently in the Massachusetts State Legislature. So this commission bill, it would establish a citizens commission to research, hold briefings, and give the legislature advice on how to transition away from nuclear weapons manufacturing, activities, etc., to green activities and technology. The Senate version of this bill is in the Joint Committee of Public Safety and Homeland Security, and our goal is really to urge our state representatives to vote it out of committee so that it can go to a floor vote and become law. This is really, it's not, I feel like we're not asking too much, but this would be a really impactful first step that the state of Massachusetts can take to divest away from nuclear weapons towards a cleaner, safer future. So that is the first action item we have for you. The second is for US legislation. This is a bill brought by Jim McGovern, who is one of our representatives in Massachusetts, for all representatives to support, and also for the executive branch in the White House to support the TPNW, which Becky talked a lot about in her presentation. And there are 93 signatories and 70 state parties who have ratified the treaty. However, the US is not one of them, not a big shock. But our job is to raise our voices and let our representatives know that we deeply care about this issue and that the US needs to abolish nuclear weapons to again create a safer future for all of us. And the UN states that states who ratify the treaty cannot develop, test, produce, acquire, possess, stockpile, use, or threaten to use nuclear weapons. It also prohibits the deployment of nuclear weapons on national territory and the provision of assistance to any state in the conduct of prohibited activities. So we really need to be proactive to our representatives to support this treaty, because it's, again, very important for not just our Earth, but for humanity. So our last action item is just, if you want to learn more about our Can Do campaign, I know Glenn will put a link in the chat if you don't want to scan the QR code, but just to learn more about what we do, events that we put on, meetings that we hold, what we're discussing. If you want to get more involved, this is another way to get more involved here in Massachusetts. And that's it from me. I just want to say thank you to all of our speakers who joined us. All three of you are amazing. And I just want to say thank you to all of us. Thank you to all of you for joining and staying with us throughout this entire program.
Yeah.
Have a good one, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Goodbye.
Thank you,
Have
everybody.
a good day, evening.